Okay.
All right, everybody ready? All right, let's have some fun.
Let's do it.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is a rainy, cool day in Fort Collins, Colorado. So wherever you're joining us from, hopefully you're getting some spring showers to bring things later on, or you're enjoying warm weather already. I'm your host for the CNHP seminar series, and this is our last one of this season. My name is Rob Shore. I'm a zoologist with the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. And for those of you who may be attending one of these for the first time, the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, as a host of other programs, started in the 70s as kind of an extension tool for the Nature Conservancy to identify some of the last great places. And that team of biologists that would go out and look for where the best assemblages of the rarest populations would provide that as a way of prioritizing where conservation work might be conducted. That's now expanded to all the states in the US, all the provinces in Canada, and a host of, excuse me, South and Caribbean countries. And it's now managed by the Nature Serve. And we all provide, and I say all of these groups provide information for broad scale conservation in the areas they are, and then work collaboratively to do that on greater landscapes. So today we have a really interesting talk because it talks about how we share those kind of data, and in a new way that's kind of how we can take more than just the information that we collect as natural heritage programs and combine it with other resources. So I'm really excited. And we have a broad panel that's going to be talking to you here briefly. But before we jump into that, really, I want to take you through Colorado State University's land acknowledgement statement. And that is that Colorado State University acknowledges with respect that the land CSU is on is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. The area of CSU was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. CSU is founded as a land grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built upon. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. All right, so some of these presenters you've seen in the past talks that we've given. We have repeat customers, Jeremy Seamers, the lead zoologist with the Natural Heritage Program. We have Sarah Marshall, wetland ecologist extraordinaire, who you've seen on previous presentations. And I think, Dave, you've participated in these as well, haven't you? Or is this your first time?
This is my first one.
All right. We also have our director, Dave Anderson, who's going to be participating in this. And we have our Conservation Data Services team leads, Michael Menifee and Amy Greenwell with us. So I think, Dave, you're leading us off. Why don't, Michael, you share those slides, and Dave, you go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rob. We are really excited to join you all today as the final seminar in the CNHP seminar series to tell you about CODEX. And CODEX is a new and really exciting development for Colorado Natural Heritage Program. And go ahead. So we wanted to talk with you. Oh, can you go to the back previous one, Michael? Thank you. We go to the next slide, please. We wanted to talk with you about why we're doing this, tell you about what CODEX is, how it works, and what needs it will meet. Next slide, please. There's a huge challenge in bringing data into decision making, and states and federal agencies have great intentions and plans, but it is really hard to get all of the current data layers and put them all together into one place to make good decisions. So that's what we're trying to solve through CODEX. Other states are doing this already, and they're ahead of Colorado, and we believe that it is time for our state to be empowered with this technology. So CODEX is a collaborative project to bring spatial data together into one place where everyone can use it. It's an intuitive map interface where users can view data and make maps. And it's a report generator that keeps sensitive data secure, but it provides reports on areas of interest about where there are conflicts and opportunities. It's a place where users can have an account and where all of their queries about areas of interest are saved, and they can go back to them easily from there. And it's also a way for agencies and organizations to guide and track conservation, management, and development within their areas of interest. We're doing this with many partners. Our 4 key partners are NatureServe, who is the development team for building and maintaining CODEX. They play the same role in 10 other states where the same technology is being used. Colorado Natural Heritage Program is Colorado's host for CODEX. It's going to live on our website. We're going to manage the data layers and the queries that run within the tool, and we're going to host trainings to help everybody learn how to use it. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is our lead partner in providing the services in CODEX. They're bringing a lot of data into CODEX as well. Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust has really been a thought leader with us in working out how we can make CODEX serve the private lands conservation community as best as it possibly can. We have many partners also in hosting data. CODEX is going to bring data from a lot of different places into the map viewer where everybody can interact with them together. So Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, NatureServe, faculty in the Agricultural and Resource Economics Department at Colorado State University, folks at Metcalf Archaeological Consultants, the Nature Conservancy, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife are working closely with us to bring some of their key and important data sets into CODEX. We've been developing this with critical help from our working group. And this working group is composed of a really diverse group of different organizations throughout in Colorado that are CNHP's key partners, including federal, state, county, municipal, nonprofit, and for-profit partners. CODEX is being funded with contributions from many different sources. Individual donors and the Gates Family Foundation, along with Chevron, have gotten us out the door with the development and building CODEX. Forest Service has helped us and develop data resources that are going to be featured in CODEX and get them ready. And the Warner College of Natural Resources and the Vice President for Research of Colorado State University has helped us with our working group and training budgets. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is going to contribute the funds that keep CODEX current from year to year, so the annual maintenance costs are being covered by Parks and Wildlife. The CODEX community includes a broad range of partners that includes many agencies, organizations, local and tribal governments, academia, and industry. And so one of the big conservation efforts that has really come into focus for us now, now that the Biden administration has made formal commitments to achieving this, is the 30 by 30. And that is a global commitment through the Convention on Biological Diversity to conserve 30% of the Earth's land and waters by the year 2030. So it's going to take a massive, holistic and collaborative approach to measure Colorado's progress and guide Colorado's progress in the 3030. And so all the stakeholders involved are going to need to access data that can be used to support the planning that's going to need to happen in order to be successful. And CODEX is a source of those data. CODEX is a place where all of those data come together and can be looked at holistically by all of the partners involved in achieving these large conservation goals. So with that, I think we're going to kick it over to Matt Schultz. Matt Schultz is our lead collaborator at Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And Matt wasn't able to join us in person today, but he's got a recorded presentation that he's going to share with us.
Oh. Sorry, you guys. Just a sec.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. That was a good overview. And I will talk a little bit about CPW's data and how this tool could be utilized.
So Michael, I hear it playing in the background, but I'm not sure we're sharing it just yet.
The quality of life that brings us, and still CNHP is going to be the host for CODEX.
Apologies, you guys. I'll be right with you.
Nope, no worries. So Dave, you mentioned the role CPW is playing in this. Who are some of the other big players? You mentioned a list of organizations. Who have been the other personnel that have kind of been, I don't know, big collaborators in this process and kind of been pushing along with you?
Yeah, it's been quite wonderful to work with folks at CPW. We've had, the CPW has their own working group put together, and they've been meeting on their own, and then sometimes with us to really bring forward CPW's needs for CODEX. And that group includes folks from that are working on trails planning at CPW, the energy liaisons, as really key personnel there, and folks who are involved in the State Wildlife Action Plan implementation. It's quite a broad range of different personnel from CPW that we're working on with this.
Okay, Michael, looks like you're up. I'll take myself off screen.
Data and how this tool could be utilized. But talk a little bit about CPW's data and how this tool could be utilized, but also want to talk about how I got involved in the project and how I see this tool benefiting my work. And before I forget, I just want to acknowledge our CPW working group that's helping direct the launch of this tool and how that's going to look. So we've got some great folks from our regions with our energy liaisons and land use coordinators, our GIS unit, trails program, and then species conservation. So next, please. And yeah, so I co-manage our resource stewardship program. This program exists to document and inventory all of the natural and cultural resources on state parks. And we evaluate the condition of those resources and then offer some guidance through the stewardship plans for how park staff can either improve or maintain resource condition. So we often work in partnership with other organizations like CNHP, History Colorado, Colorado State Forest Service, our local universities, and then a whole host of NGOs and others to accomplish this work. Next. And then part of our duties also include reviewing all of the ground disturbing projects that happen on state parks to ensure that we're integrating our resource goals and complying with resource laws. So this is really kind of what piqued my interest in this tool and where I see this tool being a lot of value for my work. Next. And so in our current process, we zoom into the park and our project area, and then we start just clicking on and off layers that we have available through either our data collection efforts, the data maintained by our GIS unit for species statewide, and other data layers maintained by folks like CNHP or Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. And so you can see that all these layers, I mean, there's hundreds of them. It takes a long time. And that's after we've kind of went out and found it, like pulled it down and worked with our partners to get all these data in one place. So, and I think you can go to the next one. So the end result of this process is to provide advice to project managers or park managers for locations to avoid and times of year that that maybe the project is best conducted in. And so here's an example of a trail project where we were able to avoid some critical habitat areas, and just how we route that around that important stuff. So and then to talk a little bit more specifically about data, so CPW has a great GIS unit that has really developed a solid process for updating and maintaining statewide data of wildlife habitats and occurrences. This process involves working really closely with our biologists, our district wildlife managers, and our partners to map everything from big game habitat to raptor nest locations, from Abert squirrel to yellow-billed cuckoo, and all the species in between. So there's literally 500 data layers that exist for all these species. And then, so we were clicking through a couple of examples. The first one was mule deer. This one's bald eagle. Here are the raptor nests that are mapped statewide. And so some of these data are are publicly available, and some require formal agreements to be shared out. And then the cool thing about this tool is it has the power to integrate both types of data, because the actual locations of the sensitive species aren't shared, but you still get the tabular report at the end that lets you know what exists in the buffered area. And so we're currently evaluating all of the available data layers that we have, which could be included in the tool. And there's a narrow range of species that are used to drive comments for development projects that we're looking at, but then also there's a much broader range of species that have relevance for conservation planning. So like when you would want to know if there's a species of greatest conservation need from our state wildlife action plan that has a range that overlaps with the particular property that you're thinking about conserving. So we've got a good amount of data that's associated with that state wildlife action plan that we're looking at integrating, specifically conservation opportunity areas, and then some of the information on habitats and threats. So broader than just my work, I think CPW will find a lot of other utility in this tool. So our state trails program has been supportive of this tool from the beginning, and they're looking at having the footprint of each trail grant proposal entered into the tool so that both the applicant and the grant reviewers can start with a good understanding of the habitats and resources in the area. Applicants would be able to adjust their project boundaries to avoid important habitat areas. And so our district wildlife managers, this is a map of all of our districts, play a really important role in those trail proposals, as well as many other types of projects in their local area. And so my hope is that our field staff will find this tool easier than clicking on and off all those layers like I showed earlier. And as you can imagine, with over 100 or around 100 district wildlife managers around the state, their ability to conduct GIS analysis on all these layers probably varies, both from a technological knowledge standpoint, but also from a time standpoint, just given everything else they're tasked with. Next. And then so CPW also employs energy liaisons and land use coordinators, which I talked about earlier, in each region. And they've been incredibly helpful in steering the direction of this tool. So their positions focus either on coordinating comments when more than one district is involved, or handling other specific topic areas, types of development. And so the one thing there's a number of ways that I think this tool could help. I know certain regions get a lot of early scoping requests for solar facilities, and I think this tool would be set up well to help inform some of those efforts and provide some of that information that's needed by developers to make an informed decision about the best location for their facilities. So, and really the real benefit from the developer standpoint is a minimization of risk on their financial investment. So, if you're choosing between two potential sites, it's often better to know up front which hoops you're going to have to jump through, and how long that might take before you really start dumping money into the project. So And next, yes, and then, so while this tool is super powerful, we don't want to overlook the importance of actually communicating with a human being regarding projects. Our district wildlife managers have extensive experience and knowledge in their local area, and not all of that experience can be put on a map. So while the tool is a great starting place to get everyone on the same page, it's always necessary to talk to local agency staff and others to get the full picture. So, but as Dave was talking about, I think this tool checks a lot of boxes for us: efficiency, transparency, and hopefully leading to better conservation outcomes. So with that, I'll turn it to, is Eric next?
Thank you, Matt.
So yeah, thanks, Matt. Virtually, Matt, thank you. And in addition to some of the things that Matt just discussed as to how CODEX might be able to be used internally within CPW, there are also some data layers that we just wanted to focus on briefly that has been motivated by the rollout of CODEX for us to generate them and to get them organized. And these are some layers that previously have not been able to be viewable by the general public. They might be used in different analyses or different by different partners, but having them viewable as well as having them available within reports for project areas has not been something that's been made available to our partners easily, and CODEX is allowing that to happen. So one example of those types of data are a bunch of distribution models, and a lot of these have been made for plants. I believe either all or a very large number, very large percentage of plants that are on the within the SWAP, the Species State Wildlife Action Plan. Plants are in the SWAP for Colorado, and we do have a large number of distribution models created for all of those plants that are in that list. And so CODEX is allowing these to be viewable, but then also importantly, they're also creating hits or creating locations within or they're brought up on locations within project areas to know that they may be available. So Michael, next slide, please. So in addition to the distribution models, we also have been creating some data that may not be as prevalent within Colorado Parks and Wildlife's data set. And so one of those was plants, but we also have a few other species that we're focusing on. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has a large data set that is being incorporated into CODEX, and we're trying to fill in some of those gaps that we have at the Natural Heritage Program. And for some of these species, we're creating range maps that are just general representations of where these things are located on the landscape. And we're doing these for terrestrial species at the Huck 10 watershed level. And this is a way to just generally display ranges for these species of where they're present and then where they are expected to be within their range. And these will show up both in the map viewer as well as in the project report tool. Next slide, please. We're also looking at doing some of these types of maps for aquatic invasive species. And so one of those examples is the bullfrog, which you see here. And these are provided at a finer scale for invasive species. We're not as concerned about if people know where they are or specifically where they're located. And so the more detailed information we can get out about those, the better. And this is an example of the bullfrog that's done at the Huck 12 level, which is a smaller watershed than the Huck 10 for the terrestrial species. We're also looking at doing this for the red-eared slider as well as chytrid fungus, which are other aquatic invasive species. So next slide, please. CODEX will also allow users to view wildlife and other conservation data within watershed boundaries and alongside key water and wetland layers like the National Wetlands Inventory and then fens and playas as well. Watershed boundaries are particularly helpful in supporting efforts ranging from stream management planning to locating potential wetland mitigation and voluntary restoration sites. So within CODEX, we're having these other water and wetland data layers that may have been available and viewable, but not in context with all of the other species data that might be present out there. And CODEX is allowing these things to be all brought together in one place. So next slide, please. So there are a large number of data layers that are being brought into CODEX, and they're either being used within the report generation tool or within the map viewer. Shown on the slide are a couple of those examples and things that we are hoping to bring into CODEX or that have already been brought in, and we're moving forward with bringing these data in. And so instead of going through a bunch of slides and listing all these potential things and showing you, we thought actually showing you the application would be a better way to view this. And so Amy is going to take us through some of these data layers and to give you a better orientation of the map viewer and some of the data layers that are present on CODEX.
Okay, hopefully you can see the map.
Yep, looks good.
We might have lost Amy. Let's see.
Amy, you might still be on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for bringing up the map viewer. I assume everything I said probably went unheard, but just to make a quick point, we do have more data to add to this, but there's quite a lot of information here right now. So I'm going to quickly go through the table of contents and describe some of the layers that we're viewing. And then I want to leave plenty of time for Michael to do a demo and actually show you how to create a project and look at these detailed project reports. So quickly through the table of contents, if you notice up at the top, there's a base map option. If you want to click on that real quick, Michael. If you're familiar with web browsers, these will be familiar options to you. Moving down to reference layers. And you could turn off the base map. Moving down to reference layers, just would like to point out that some of these things are nested and they also have scale dependencies. So if you see things grayed out in the table of contents, it's likely that you just need to zoom in to see the information. So like in transportation right now at the statewide level, you can see highways and major roads, but you would actually need to zoom in on the map before the mile points and the local roads will show up. And you'll see this sort of structure throughout the table of contents on the map viewer. Another nifty feature too, if you look at the layer description. So if you click next to transportation, if you click the layer description next to transportation, it'll show you the dates of the data and it'll have hyperlinks to the metadata files. So those are just kind of quick ways to find out more about the layers that you're looking at. Michael, can you click on the layer description so folks can see how to access the metadata? Thank you. So each data set has information like this. We're trying to be very transparent about how current it is and where it came from. So if you go down to species and habitats, this has really kind of the bulk of the information that we'll be reporting on in our project reports, although certainly not all. The first data set is CNHP tracked species and natural communities. And maybe I'm seeing a little bit of a lag here on the screen. If we go down to the tracked species and natural communities, for folks that are familiar with heritage data, this would be CNHP element occurrences. So these are the locations of rare plants, animals, and plant communities in Colorado. In this particular layer, we have, we're displaying the information by USGS quadrangle. So it's not the precise locations on the map. And if you ID one of those, you'll see that there's a list of species associated with each quad in Colorado. We also have the CNHP range maps that Jeremy was referring to earlier. Right now, let me let this catch up a little bit here. So if we ID on one of those quads, you'll see a list of species tracked by the Heritage Program.
Oh, I got it ahead of you. I'm sorry. I'm now on the range maps. I already clicked on the track species. I apologize. Maybe it's not showing my screen on real time.
I think there's some sort of a lag, but we'll do our best to get through it. Yeah, so then we also have our CNHP range maps. Right now we have bumblebees and dragonflies and damselflies and some small mammals. As Jeremy said, we're really trying to gather information on species that we don't have element occurrence, good element occurrence data for in our CNHP data set, and species that aren't really focused on by CPW, so complementing the other data sets in CODEX. And then, of course, there's the CPW species activity mapping data, which has, over 200 different data sets. It's public information from CPW. So the important thing to kind of note with this is some of the information that you see in the map viewer or some of the information that will end up in the project reports is not visible on the map viewer. There's some private CPW data layers that will be reported on. There's the plant distribution models, some bird conservancy of the Rockies data, and then the CNHP element occurrences, the specific locations will be used to generate the reports instead of the quads that you're viewing in the map viewer. So there'll be a lot more information available in your project report. So if we move down to special areas, I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quicker just so that we have time to look at the fun parts and interact with the map. If we go down to special areas, we have CNHP's potential conservation areas, which are landscapes important for rare and imperiled species. And they also include the important plant areas as well. They're kind of nested within these PCAs. We have Fish and Wildlife Service critical habitats, the Audubon's important bird areas. Right now we're showing National Register of Historic Places, but we are hoping that we'll be able to get cultural resources by the Colorado Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. This would likely be a data set that's not visible on the map and just showing up in the reports due to the sensitivity of the data. We have a COMAP, which is our managed areas and protected areas layer. This has information on who owns, manages, or holds conservation easements on a property and will be an important resource for the 30 by 30 project. And under natural features, I just wanted to highlight the land cover data set. We have a return on investment ecosystem services report that was pretty much based off a study done at CSU with us and the land trust community and Dr. Andy Seidel, who's an ag econ professor at CSU. Under conservation planning right now, we have terrestrial ecological system patches. So these are large patches for our ecological systems in Colorado. We have a landscape disturbance index to tell you how disturbed the landscape is. So this is based on a distance decay function for various threats. We just updated that layer this year, and we included the CODEX trails in the LDI. In conservation planning, we're also going to include resilient and connected landscapes, and we're going to include NatureServe's map of biodiversity importance, or MOBI. And then the last item in the table of contents is our wetlands and water and wetlands section. We'll be adding fence to this and natural seeps and springs. But the National Wetland Inventory data, the NWI data, also does appear in our CODEX report, so you can get acres of wetlands in your project area. And then the last section is just administrative boundaries for our partners that are going to be regularly using the tool. So with that little quick demonstration, I'm going to pass it off to Michael to create some projects and show us some of the cool functionality of CODEX. And just FYI, Michael, it does seem like the screen's kind of pretty laggy compared to.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to stop the share in hopes that it picks up on the lag. Apologies for the lag. Not quite sure what's going on there. So we'll try one more time and hopefully it happier this time.
No worries, Michael. It's sometimes just a condition of sharing things with multiple participants.
Okay, I've tried again. Are we okay?
We see it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody, and really nice intro, Amy. I wanted to share with you all, and now I've managed to select the screen somehow. Let's just F5 this and make that go away. Okay, so when you get on the map, you're able to make a project in a number of different ways, and basically this is where you submit a parcel or a set of parcels to run reports against all the data that's uploaded in this massive data portal and get it in a format that's useful for you. There's here where you can go ahead and create the report. It's called Create Project, and there's a number of ways we can do this. The simplest way, which I'm going to demonstrate, is just drawing a project shape area. You can also upload shape files. You can also use geodatabases and even Google Earth KML files. There's really a myriad of ways, because you can also use the existing layers that we've uploaded to make a request area based off of, say, a parcel and co-map of a protected area, maybe a conservation easement you want to run a report on. You can just select the feature and use that. In order to make it, you'll notice it's telling you have to zoom in a certain amount if you're going to draw. So I'm going to kind of just draw a sample one up here, sort of by Pingree Park, since we are all part of that. And so now I'm in far enough, you can see that red's no longer there, and I can just start drawing. So if I wanted to kind of just get this valley in here next to these lakes and reservoirs, and then just double click to accept the shape, and let's say, okay, yeah, this is where I really want to grab the data for. Maybe I wanted to see some of those recent fires impacts on this particular area. So I'll go ahead and click accept. And then you go into the project basically submission window here, and you have to give it a title. So we'll call this Pingree Test, and I'm going to call it 2 because I already made one, so it'd be ready for us. And we'll call it a conservation restoration project. We select the project type. And in this case, I'm just assuming that we're doing a restoration project after the fire. And then the buffer value is going to select the amount of distance outside of your project boundary. It searches for data. There's a minimum 1 mile project buffer required for data sensitivity. But in this case, I'm going to say, let's go 2 miles. We really want to know, what are the nearby things that could be impacted by this. And so we'll just call this a testing demo, and then you just fill in the rest of the information you need to. And down here, you can also select other reports you want to run. And conservation planning is going to be a free report that's still under development now. But the return on investment is what Amy was leading to. And we'll take a look at those in just a second. I'm trying to watch my time, and I think I only have about 5 minutes, so we have enough time for questions. So I'll go ahead and click submit. And I'm going to show you the project I submitted earlier. Now that it's been submitted, this normally takes about 5 minutes for the back end to run, and then it'll alert you via email that your report's ready. And then you go to this My Projects tab up here, and you can see all the projects you've submitted. And you can see this Pingree test 1 I submitted earlier. If I go in the one we just submitted, it says it's still processing. So let's take a look at the results in one of these while we still have a little time, and use the test one that I created. And I'm just going to open the report file and the return on investment file. But just to point out, from here, you can also download the shapefile, even if you drew it, that was used for the boundary of your project. And you can also download the project report results as CSV, so you can easily import it into Excel or other databasing solutions of your choice.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
I just want to let you know you're doing fine on time. So unless somebody's taking the microphone from you here shortly, we've still got plenty of time. So don't feel like you have to rush through it.
Oh, no, yeah, thanks, appreciate it. And so let's go ahead and go back and look at one of these, like I was saying on the test. Let's look at the project report first. And so here, the project report starts with some basic introductory information that's actually still in the process of being added. So there'll be a little introductory here, and then the information about your project and contact. And then you first get a series of maps with your project results. We'll start with an aerial locator map so you can kind of see where your project is. And these are great, whether you're a for-profit consulting firm or a nonprofit trying to go for a grant. These kind of reports are going to be ideal to submit with your project materials as supporting materials. So these maps also are customizable. Here's the topographic map that shows the land status as reflected by COMAP. And you can see here there's a mix of lands, including the state land, which represents the Pingree campus here. And then you can also see the buffered search area with the red outline. And I went with a 2-mile buffer. And so you can see that extending out clear to Rocky Mountain National Park down here in the south. But again, this is a great way to get context of what lands have been conserved nearby. It really speaks to the utility of this for 30 by 30. And this will all be borne out in the reports as well. And then there's this web map as submitted by user. And this is basically, when I was back in the application, had I turned on, say, those models that Jeremy was showing and left them on when I submitted the project, they'd actually show up here, and you'd see those bumblebee models or whatever just draping over this map, or whatever else the user selects to be on when they click submit on the project will show up on this map. So it's also a way to kind of create a custom map view, which would be really helpful for folks that don't have GIS in particular, but I think it'll help automate things for even folks that do. And then we kind of get into the results of what did we find. And so the way the report's structured is we kind of go to the regulatory species first. I'm going to go ahead and zoom this in just a little bit because I feel like it's a little small. Okay, so the first group is regulatory species, and we find that there's green back cutthroat trout that is listed, and also a swap species. And you can see all the information we provide in the report across the different data columns here. And you'll notice also there's these hyperlinks, and what that's for is it will link to NatureServe Explorer and really give you a drilled down view of this species and its conservation status. It'll provide a myriad of things, and I'm getting some lag now too. Many of you are already familiar with NatureServe Explorer, but it's a great biographical sketch of these species, where they occur, and links to a lot of other information. And so let's go back to the result. And I'm sorry, here it is. I'm flying around here. Trying to remember which one we left off on. It's going to be the last one, isn't it? Nope. Okay. This is the same one, so I'm just going to go with it. Let me zoom back in. And so, and then as Jeremy mentioned, we're really also bringing the models into this. Clearly, the whole state hasn't been surveyed. And so these are the species that are regulatory species that potentially there that have been identified either through models, range maps, or records that have really low original precision. And so we don't know they're there, but they certainly could be, and it's something you want to be on the lookout for. And you see a lot more species pop up once those models come to bear. There's no Fish and Wildlife Service critical wildlife habitat here, so nothing was found there for that table. And then we go into the other species of concern, and this is going to be the rest of the species that are not regulatory that comes from CNHP, CPW, and other data partner lists. And so here's the documented occurrences within 2 miles of the project area. And again, you get these hyperlinks to Explorer, you get the same information across the columns. And then going in, it just continues table 4. And then table 5, you get the potential. So it's kind of the same operation. You know, you start with the stuff that's in the database that we have map locations for that are known occurrences. We put all that in one table. And then your next table, it's sort of more like what's potentially there through models, range maps, or low precision records. So, and then we go into these special areas, and this identifies any of those things that Amy was highlighting earlier. And turns out there are some potential conservation areas here. In this case, the hyperlink, if I click it, would go to a full site report that tells you why is the Pinnock Creek PCA important, and what elements of biodiversity are really being conserved on that site, and why is it significant to Colorado's biodiversity, and those kinds of information. And then other special areas, there were no important bird areas or state natural areas identified in this particular area. But it does give you next the managed areas, and this is pulling from the COMAP data, so the map of protected lands that Amy and I showed a minute ago, and it shows there's the Pingree Park campus, and it shows Roosevelt National Forest and a National Wild and Scenic River, and there's also a little pocket of private land in there with no protection at all. And so you can kind of see how this again would be really helpful for 30 by 30, or maybe you're even just a land trust or someone working on a conservation project and want to see the context, how everything fits together and how you can kind of build on existing conservation in the area. And then finally, you get the riparian information in this report, and this really details the number of acres of the NWIA features within your project area. So you can kind of see the different systems you're working with. Before I go to questions, I also wanted to show the return on investment report. And this is, as Amy hinted, where we take those natural land cover data set cover types and associate them with the ecosystem services, or basically the benefits they provide to us through flood control and other things those systems provide. And then we took that original work we did with the Land Trust and Dr. Slidell and the Ag Sciences School here at CSU, where we found about $4 to $12 of every dollar the Colorado taxpayers invested in easements through the state tax credit or Great Outdoors Colorado has returned as ecological system benefits to the citizens of Colorado. And now you can run that same thing we did on the report on any parcel you desire. And so in this case, we can sort of see this little pingree shape that I grabbed. Here it is on the map. And again, it shows the protected lands because that could be useful for this. But this is the map of interest here. So this shows us the NLCD, the National Land Cover Dataset cover types. And then in the back end, it's counting all the acres of all these different systems. And then it takes the same formulas that we developed in our earlier report that's based off of the literature, basically, of what values you can ascribe to these things, and go down to results, and here you go. So it looks like, it breaks it down by the acres, but the total bottom line, and you're going to notice a huge variability, and that's due to the, really trying to be scientific and really give the best answer we can here as a range based off of different studies and approaches people have taken to tackle ecosystem services and what their values are. But we're looking on the order of 200,000 to 600,000 per year in annual ecological system benefits. And if you wanted to figure out a return on investment, clearly we don't know what you invest in this property, so we provide the calculations and equations you would need to calculate it for your project in the introductory text of this report. But it's pretty amazing just to see how these systems can really contribute a lot of value for properties that we can serve. So those are the two main reports I wanted to highlight. Looking at my clock, I see we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. So with that, why don't we go ahead and open up and see if folks have questions.
You're taking my line, Michael.
Oh, go ahead.
So Liz Slokar just fed one. Great. This is right into the chat. Will access to CODEX require a subscription, or is it just a register to use system?
Excellent question. So it will require registration for any reports. The map can be viewed without being all registered up, but any of the features you will need to register. And to launch, we're going to provide all of the reports for free. There is quite a large cost to maintain this, and we do want to keep the data fresh and updated and keep this vibrant. So we're going to have the conservation planning report and the return on investment report will be available for free. And the project review report, when we institute fees, when we launch again, there'll be a number of months where it's free for all the reports for everyone. But at the time that we go to the fee schedule, there will be, particularly for consultants and commercial use, charges to get the full-born project detailed report that gives all the species that we looked at first.
Michael, or any the panelists, any ballpark idea of what those subscriptions might cost, and what do you think the timeline is for this being up and running for people to get access?
Yeah, so we're working with external partners. So the timing of it is partially based on our external partners, and we're wary to give an exact date and speak for them. But we think at this point, the very earliest it can launch would be probably right around the 1st of July or end of June. And once we launch it, we do want to have at least well over a month of free access. And we will need to work to add the basically the functionality for that after it launches. So it will be probably some months after it launches that we charge fees. The fees, I don't know the exact amounts, but the good news is they're going to be significantly cheaper than it costs to get the same information through a manual environmental review that CNHP now does. Those start at $250 and go up from there. And these will probably be more in the neighborhood of $50 to $75 or $100 a shot. So less than half the cost of what we charge for the same data now.
All right. Buffy Length put a question in here too. Can you talk a bit more about the ecosystem services value calculation report and some potential applications or examples of how people have used these or how you think these are going to be used?
You bet. So I have a great example. So the state tax credit came up for review, and it was sunset legislation. And there was a great concern in the state legislature of, are we really getting anything for all these tax breaks we're getting? And they were considering eliminating the state tax credit for conservation easements, which has really been a major push for private conservation in Colorado and a huge tool. And so when we were able to demonstrate that value of $4 to $12 for that public investment, it convinced the state legislature that this indeed is a program worth funding. And they ended up even funding COMAP, which CNHP also manages, so that we could better map all the protected lands of Colorado to even understand these questions better. And I think on a local scale, maybe you're a land trust or a nonprofit going for a grant, and you want to find out, if we conserve this property, what do these benefits look like? And you can include that in your application or your scope and say why this is important. And I could also see local open space programs. Maybe they want to see, what does our portfolio of sites provide our county or community and the annual benefits? So, it'd be a really great way to tell your story for really a myriad of groups, and also to study just what are the benefits that you're conserving.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, is quantifying this scale of value hasn't always been particularly easy to do.
I don't think there's ever been a tool like this in existence in Colorado, and it's really thanks to also working with Dr. Andrew Slidell, who's the economist that understands the back end of the economic equations, that we're able to bring this to bear in this tool. And then CNHP, provides the ecological data and the technical know-how to make it all happen. But it is a first. That's right.
Got another question here in the chat from Joanne Hackos. She was asking, can we, I think as private citizens, get help to analyze an area if we are a citizen group trying to block an adverse development near our homes? So how do you envision this being used by private citizens that want to maybe have more say in what's happening in their local area?
I think that's absolutely one of the uses we anticipate. One of the nice things about this is we're not advocacy based at CNHP. We work with the agencies, we work with private landowners and consultants and everyone in between. Our focus is providing decision quality scientific data. And so if you're a group that wants to know, how do I oppose something like this, this project? How do I know what it's going to do? You can get those project boundaries or even just draw them from a web map or a planning map you have, or a Google Earth file maybe you found, and then you can start to identify what are the protected species. Are there listed species that are in the project area? What are we looking at, that's in play here? And that, I think, would give you a toolbox of really looking at what are the potential impacts and what are the conservation targets, things like that.
Okay, I got another one here that is I'm really attached to because of my inability to use the host of GIS tools that are available. But Roz McClellan asked, since there are so many new GIS models being developed along the lines of CODEX, how does an applicant for a trail grant through the new regional partnerships choose among them all? How about a synthesizing of the basic methodology used in all of them? So if people are looking to use a tool like this, what sets this one apart, and how should people think about using this? And Roz, correct me if I'm misstating that.
I'll offer something on that one. It's unique because it's a partnership. So CODEX is being done across a broad range of partners and is really integrative. And we're working hand in hand with Colorado Parks and Wildlife on this. And I do not believe there's any other tools that are bringing all of this together.
And I'd also add that we have burned COTREX into it. So all the state trails are actually in the app, which is very handy for those kinds of discussions.
Forgive me, I'm trying to respond. Roz is trying to feed me more detail about her question, and I'm not don't think I'm adequately getting it all encapsulated. So in the meantime, as I kind of clarify the question from Roz, how big do you think this data set's going to grow? Is that this is a massive piece that brings a whole host of data systems together. How big is this going to be, and how big do you think this user group grows?
We hope it's an incremental project that just kind of continues to grow and be driven by the users. We want this to be reactive to our users' needs, and we also want to be careful at the same time of avoiding what we're calling death by layer. So you don't open this thing and all of a sudden there's just a billion layers. So it's kind of balancing those two things together. And we're thinking also of adding a resource page, because one of the things you can do is also add GIS services. So if you had a list of other layers that maybe we wouldn't want to automatically load with the app, but maybe a wetlands person would really like these. And so there might be a place to just kind of grab a whole bunch of GIS services and plug them in. Or of course, you can just plug in the services that you already know of to expand the usefulness of it. Even if we haven't added those layers, you can add your own as well.
Okay, Roz, I'm learning about the system as I'm playing in it. Can you now ask your question?
Can I actually talk in person?
You are talking right now with everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Fantastic.
I wasn't convinced I could do it, but
I hope you can't see me.
No, we can't.
No, we cannot.
Oh, cool. That's perfect. Okay. So I really want to just thank Dave and Michael and Michelle and the wonderful staff there for this excellent presentation, the amazing work they've done. And just to follow up on my question, when you look at the application for the regional partnerships grants and specifically trails, the applicant has to go and find the kind of GIS they're going to use. And when you look at that application, I believe they give quite a few different links to different types of methodology. So I was just wondering if somebody's applying for a trail grant, or someone like me, a wildlife person, there was a way to synthesize the methods that I wrote this here, a way to synthesize the methodology common to all the modeling so it's clear to us out here in the unwashed public what is the basic process, and then how each one varies from the basic process. And one of the concerns, for example, me as a wildlife advocate is that so many of these models are being used by private consultants of the trail advocates. And then another one, Chaffee County and Vision, that's actually partnerships, Dave. It's a partnership. And they have a very sophisticated looking model. And where did they get that? And how does it differ from some of the other ones in the Trails Handbook? Do I leave you speechless?
Well, I think we need to do some homework to answer your question, really. I mean, it sounds like more like a homework assignment to me. I'd really be wary to start talking about all these models that we may not have even looked at and how they link to CODEX, if you know what I mean.
And before we dive any deeper to that, we're at the 1 o'clock hour. So I want to let people know that if you have to leave, we understand. If those who want to keep participating, if our presenters can still answer some questions like this, feel free to stay tuned. What I'll do is I'll let Michael and Dave take a crack at this, and I have some other questions in the background. We'll maybe stay on for about another 5 more minutes.
I thank you, Rob. Another thought comes to mind with Steve Mailer's question here on the chat that sort of answers Roz's too, but we can bring other data sets into CODEX. It has a map service. So if you have data that are not in CODEX that you want to bring into it, it can do that. And the Envision Chafee work is amazing. They have done such awesome work. There's been a whole lot of sausage making that's gone into crunching out those models. CODEX supports those, but CODEX doesn't do those. So those are a separate GIS product that they've spent a lot of effort working with their constituencies and partners on, and it's amazing. We want to support that kind of thing to happen all over the place in Colorado.
Just to dig a little more into Steve's question, as far as whether the data sets we're hosting on CODEX will be available for download directly, we are always going to point to the originators of the data sets, so that we always, I know CNHP, we want our sensitive species data available all over the web, and we like to have the people that are getting that exact spatial data from us work with us so that we make sure they understand the data and get licensed and all that. So like if the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies data or the CPW data, something, we're hoping that that'll actually lead to contact with those agencies so that you can engage with them. And it helps us all skip a bunch of steps and be a heck of a lot more efficient in that process. But we don't want to lose that human contact either in the process. And our data partners in no way would let us host these layers if we just let people grab them. I think that that's a constraint that we have here. Oh, you're thinking more common methodologies? Wait, now I'm responding to Steve Mailer's question, Ross, about public data sets and other consumables. And you can download it as a CSV format for the project results table. So you could bring those into other things as well. As far as that goes. And as far as Steve's other question, that it's not obvious to a citizen what is public and what is not public and why, COMAP definitely is the most accurate map of public lands in Colorado. We do not tell you, hey, this is the map of where to go hiking. It's more of like, what are the public lands of Colorado and what's their status? What is their management? Those kinds of questions, which is why it's so useful for things like 30 by 30. But it's not our intention for it to be a recreational atlas of all the public lands in Colorado that you can hike on. It's more of a management tool.
Okay, in our last 2 minutes, Peter Horgan had one in the Q&A. Can you put different weights on layers you might choose to look at against an area to create a weighted overlay analysis of sorts?
That functionality isn't built in, but the amazing thing about CODEX is it's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats thing, where multiple states have these. And every time one state makes an investment, like we did with the return on investment, that functionality did not exist in the tool until we found some private donors that wanted to see that functionality come to the tool. And we were able to make it happen. And now anyone in the whole NatureServe network nationwide that runs this tool can get it. So, if we were able to find some funding and support for something like that, it's probably within the realms of possibilities. It's just really linking up with the NatureServe programmers and seeing what's possible. But we're always open to those kinds of ideas. And again, we want this to be a vibrant, living thing. We don't want to just once and done it. We want it to be an integrated process that's continually evolving.
Careful what you wish for, Michael.
I hear you.
Well, I want to thank the panelists. This is a real new avenue for CNHP to provide information with a host of partners. And I think highlighting these kind of tools is especially what we need to be doing more of to figure out how to get our data in the hands of those who are using it actively. So I really appreciate Dave, Michael, Jeremy, Sarah, Amy for joining us today. And I really appreciate those out there in the audience that came out and found out about our project, other projects like this. And we hope to pick up this seminar series when the fall semester picks up, after we all return from the field, poking and prodding plants for a while. But looking forward to seeing you in September, and I really appreciate you attending these meetings. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.